Hi, y'all. Nice to see you. Nice to be seen. I know you're nervous. It's okay. Actually, they're recording this for like streaming on Friday, so yeah, maybe I should just make a mistake now and get it out of my system, and then we don't have to worry about it. Let us take nothing for granted. Not the water coming out of the faucet, nor the taste of bread, nor the call of the lone crow overhead late in the afternoon. Don't take the shoestring for granted that does its job every day without complaint, nor the way the fingernail clipper responds when asked by squeezing thumb and forefinger. Don't take dark roast for granted, nor the smell of its brewing, nor chocolate, especially chocolate, nor the weather predicted with certainty by eyewitness news, nor the leaf pasted upon the windshield, its puckered body yellow, its spidery vein green, which even the wiper cannot remove. Especially, do not take for granted the venality of those in power, nor the callousness of those intent upon teaching a lesson to someone else which they have not learned themselves. Instead, be taken aback. Don't take your indignity for granted either. Your indignity at the insensitivity of the privileged to mistake their position for their worth. Don't take the hunger of the poor for granted, nor the drum's tattoo that summons the dogs of war. Don't assume inevitability. For all at this moment, all things are still evitable. And we don't know what there will be an outbreak of. Embrace surprise, for in our surprise, we embody the possibility of something else. In our surprise, we remind the world of what it might be. The trick, it seems to me, is to take the moment out of the picture frame or the cardboard box or the digital bite or the philosophical system, the equating of this for that, the alchemy of life into metaphor, when nothing equates with anything exactly. And it's a space between where we think something fits and what the fitting leaves out that life breathes. Don't let the ever-continuing recombination of genetic material blind you to the beauty of its expression. When we take nothing for granted, we will appear a little daft, apparently obtuse, dull-witted, as if we're only noticing something for the first time, which everybody else has known since the last day before the first day of middle school, the last day to learn something before you were pilloried for your ignorance. When we take nothing for granted, people will be embarrassed for us and also for themselves. So, let us be masters of the obvious. Masters what everyone already knows but appears to have forgotten because they don't name it, and not naming it, they lose it. Let us be known for saying, the sun came up, the sky is blue, the clouds are white, the leaves are turning colors, someone's emptied the dishwasher, there's gas in the car, this food tastes good, this system is unjust, things will change, you are my friend. Let us be masters of the repeated affirmation, masters of the redundancy of affection, giving more gifts than necessary in the knowledge that the slippage in the universe requires us to give more than we should have to. And so let us be masters of appearing foolish, masters of what is already known, only to be found again and again, and delighted in each time at its discovery. Especially, let us not take this moment here together for granted. You in there, Keith? All right. I love this big old world. I love its crazy old ways. I love how it makes me laugh and makes me cry on the very same day. I love this big old world. It makes me want to sing and shout. It makes me want to raise my voice, keep on singing till somebody kicks me out. Out on the water with the wide waves rolling, I'm just a little boat on the sea. I set my sail, I hold on tight, it's all much bigger than me. Bigger than me. I love this big old world. I love its crazy old ways. I love how it makes me laugh and makes me cry on the very same day. I love this big old world. I love the blue sky. I love the rain. I love how the sun comes up every morning and I get a chance to start all over again. Don't understand it how the more I learn, the less I'm sure I know. I spend all my time just holding on tight when I ought to be letting go. Letting go. Na 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 na. Na na na. Na 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 na. I love this big old world. I love its crazy old ways. I love how it makes me laugh and makes me cry on the very same day. I love this big old world. The wind in the trees and the hoot owl calls. God, I wish my heart could grow a little bit bigger so I could hold it all. When my time is done, nothing for me left to sing. I want to let go and sail away like a kite with a broken string. Broken string. I love this big old world. I love its crazy old ways. I love how it makes me laugh and makes me cry on the very same day. On the very same day. On the very same. Na 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 na. La 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 la. Na 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 na. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I had a really funny thing happen to me this weekend. My grown son lives in the Hudson River Valley, and he was singing in a chorus. And my wife and I, we live in Massachusetts, close to south of Boston, close to Providence. So we wanted us to come to the concert. I was leaving, it's like 5 o'clock next morning to come here, but we drove over there and they did a concert and they said, now we've got a couple of people who want to do readings and songs. In the middle of it, he stood up and he said, here's a poem by my father. And he read that poem. It's a total surprise. And then this moment where you get to the, don't take for granted the continuing recombination of genetic material blinds you to the beauty of its expression. And he said, looking at you, Dad. Okay, well, here we go. Let's find out what happens with this one. This is mostly true. No problem, no problem. That's what some folks say. No problem, I can help you make that problem go away. But when someone says no problem, is it a blessing or a curse? It could be better, but it might get worse. I was home in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling. My mom wasn't there, my dad wasn't there, neither were my brothers. I don't know where they were, but if they were there, this couldn't have happened, so they weren't there. I don't mean to say I was alone. My grandmother was there. She was babysitting me, which I took offense at because I was 9 years old. I was not a baby and I didn't want to be sat on. But it must be said that she was a great laissez-faire babysitter. I heard my dad use that word. I was like, lazy and fair. That seems about right. Yeah, she didn't really pay too much attention to me. She'd mostly be spending her time watching General Hospital and Days of Our Lives and As the World Turns. Every once in a while, she'd say, Billy, what are you doing? And I'd say, nothing. She'd say, all right. And then she'd go back to watching General Hospital, Days of Our Lives, and As the World Turns. So I could do pretty much anything I wanted to do, you know, as long as I didn't burn the house down. And I did not do that in this story, so we're good. But I was in my bedroom and I was staring at the ceiling, cursing my fate because I was bored. There was nothing to do. I said, I hate my life. If I only had $100 in the car keys, all my problems would be solved. I was staring at the crack in the ceiling when I heard someone calling my name out in the neighborhood. Hey, Bill! Hey, Bill! I looked out the window. I saw my friends, my pal Sally, my friend Glenn. They were at the bottom of the driveway. They said, Bill! Bill! Because we didn't knock on anybody's door there. Why would you knock on a door? There might be a grown-up there. I said, I'll be right down. So I down the hallway, down the steps, through the living room. My grandmother was watching the TV. There were my friends sitting on the front step. They said, how are you doing? And I said, I got a problem. They said, what's that? I said, I'm bored. And my friend Glenn said, no problem, no problem. I know what to do. I said, you know, if I only had $100 in the car keys, everything would be solved. He said, no problem. I said, really? He said, yeah, I know how we're going to make $100. $100? That seemed like all the money in the world to me. I said, how are we going to make $100? He said, we're going to sell freshly squeezed lemonade. And Sally, who's kind of like the resident science math genius, said, according to my calculations, if they're 12-ounce glasses, and we're going to charge 10 cents a glass, and we have to sell 1,000 glasses, we have to make 92 gallons of lemonade. Well, I said, well, I got a problem. They said, what's the problem? I said, I do not have a pitcher that holds 92 gallons of lemonade. And Glenn said, no problem, no problem. I know what to do. I said, you do? He said, yeah, we're going to make it in the bathtub. I said, that is an excellent idea. Let's shake on it. So we did. We shook on it. My grandmother called out, what are you doing, Billy? And we said, nothing. And Glenn said, is she really a babysitter? I said, yes. Sally said, according to my calculations, we're going to have 1,000 lemons and 35-pound bags of sugar. And I said, well, I got another problem. She said, what's that? I said, how are we going to pay for it? And Glenn said, don't you have any money? And I said, if I had any money, we wouldn't even having this discussion. He said, don't you know anybody in your family who has money? I said, well, my parents have some, but they're not sharing it. I said, and everybody else? I said, my brother John, my older brother John, he's saving money for a bike. And I said, well, where is it? He said, it's in the top drawer of his dresser, but I'm not supposed to take it. He would kill me. And Glenn said, don't you know, Bill, this is an investment. In order to make money, you have to spend money. It's no problem. We're going to make the money. The first thing we'll do is put the money back in his dresser. He'll never know. I said, great. He said, go get the money. So I did. We got my red wagon. We pulled it down the street. We crossed over the highway. This is on the north side of Indianapolis if you're trying to place a geography here. Pulled it down the highway till we got to the supermarket. We bought 1,000 lemonades, 35-pound bags of sugar. We put them in the cart. Pulled them back down the highway, crossed over, pulling them through the neighborhood. And I said, how are we going to squeeze all these lemons? And we stopped in front of Sally's house. She said, no problem, I'll be right back. She went into the house. 35 seconds later, she burst out of the front door holding some appliance saying, go, 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 go. We said, what is it? She said, it's my mom's Sunbeam electric juice squeezer. This is incredible. So we went back down the street and got to my house. We came in the house, bringing the 1,000 lemons, 35-pound bags of sugar, and the Sunbeam electric juice squeezer. And my grandmother said, what are you doing, Billy? And I said, nothing. And she said, all right. And Glenn said, you have a very trusting grandmother. So we took it up the stairs into our bathroom. I say our bathroom. I don't mean there were two bathrooms. One was my parents' bathroom, and I had never been in there. I was forbidden. There was a bathroom of me and my younger and older brother, and my parents only went in there about once every 6 months with like a hazmat uniform on. Like a friend of mine said, yeah, I had 3 boys. We just painted the bathroom yellow. Sally said, we have a problem. I said, what? She said, how are we going to cut these lemons? Do you have a sharp knife? Do you have 3 sharp knives? I said, well, as a matter of fact, my parents in the dining room hutch have a set of, they call it the bone-handled steak knives. And they're all sharp. I'm not supposed to touch them. And Glenn said, are your parents here? I said, not at the moment. He said, go get them. So I did. We got down on our hands and knees on the bathroom floor and we began to cut the lemons. Glenn said, we're wasting a lot of the juice on the floor. Sally said, is there a sponge or something? I said, yeah, there's right one under the bathroom vanity. So he squeezed it up. Glenn said, don't waste it, just put it right in the tub. We got that all in there. We turned on the Sunbeam electric juice squeezer and it looked like a charm, worked like a charm. We poured all that juice in there. We opened up those 35-pound bags of sugar. We poured it in. Glenn said, turn on the water. We turned it on and it filled up. Glenn said, stop, we've got 92 gallons. I said, how do you know? He said, because it's going to overflow if we put more in. And Sally said, we've got a problem. I said, what? She said, how are we going to stir it up? I said, I was thinking the same thing. I don't have a wooden spoon this big. Glenn said, do you have a canoe paddle? I said, no. He said, then no problem. I said, how are we going to solve it? He said, you know, you're a child. I said, what do you mean? He said, are we not speaking of the human wave agitator? Oh, of course the human wave agitator. How could we have forgot? Every child knows about the human wave agitator. The human wave agitator is what happens when the parent insists on you taking a bath. They climb in there and you're in there with your little toy boats and your whales and your action figures, and the parents leave the bathroom and you're bored and you begin to slide back and forth across the bottom, and pretty soon there's crests and troughs and the waves are splashing against the back and the front and the boats are capsizing. Captain, my captain, oh! And the whales are calling, oh! And the action figures are drowning. Luke, I am your blah. And you slash back and forth and it spills over to the side and your parents come in and they say, what are you doing? But they should know that every child is a human wave agitator. It's what they do. Said, who will be the human wave agitator? Sally said, it's your bathtub, Bill. I said, no problem. But this is a family story. I don't think I'm supposed to get in there buck naked. They said, do you have a bathing suit? I said, yes, go put it on. So I went in my bathroom, I put on my bathing suit. I was about to climb in the tub when Sally said, we have another problem. I said, what is that? She said, Archimedes. I said, what is Archimedes? She said, it's not as a what, it's a who. He was an ancient Greek. I said, what does ancient Greek have to do with making freshly squeezed human agitated lemonade? Well, he was a Greek and he climbed into the bathtub and there was too much lemonade and it spilled onto the floor. And so he came up with Archimedes' principle, which is you have to reduce the volume of the liquid by the volume of your body or we'll spill over the side. Glenn said, we'll be giving some of it up. Sally said, we'll have to make it value added someplace so we can make more money on it. Climb in. We reduced the amount by about 5 or 6 gallons. I climb in and they said, agitate, Bill, agitate. I started to slide back and forth and back and forth. There are waves, crests and troughs splashing up its back against the front. The boat's capsizing. Captain, my captain, the whale's breaching. Ooh! Action figures drowning. Luke, I am your blah. Freshly squeezed human agitated lemonade pouring over the side. And my grandmother said, Billy, what are you doing? And I said, nothing. She said, all right. And Glenn said, could your grandmother adopt me? And I said, I think it's all stirred up. And Glenn said, you know, this lemonade is just kind of boring. It's barely yellow. We have a problem. Sally said, no, not that. This might be disgusting, but it's not that disgusting. She said, I'm going to your kitchen. I'll be right back. She returned in a minute with a little box of 5 little bottles. And she said, look what I have. And she took a bottle of yellow food coloring in, and she squeezed, and she said, agitate, Bill, agitate. And I began to slide back and forth, and it turned this brilliant color of yellow. And Glenn said, that color is very disturbing. Can you do something else? She said, yes, I'm going to add to the value of the lemonade. And she took out the little blue tube and she squeezed it. She said, agitate, Bill. And it turned a bright green. And Glenn said, you know what would be great is if it was purple lemonade. And she said, watch this. And she dumped the red in and she confused light and pigment. I agitated and they looked down and they said, we've never seen freshly squeezed human agitated black lemonade before. I got out of the tub. My skin was a strange gray translucence. Sally said, I've never seen a human in that color before. I dried off as best as I could. I said, it still tastes pretty good as I licked my arm. I said, but we've got another problem. They said, what's your problem now? I said, we've got 92 gallons minus the volume because of Archimedes' principle in the bathtub, but we have to serve it down by the street. How are we going to get it down there? I don't have a pitcher that big. Sally said, no problem, no problem. I know what to do. I said, you do? She said, yes. Do you have a garden hose? I said, as a matter of fact, I do. She said, we're going to create a siphon and we're going to run it out of the bathroom, down the hall, down the steps, through the living room, down the driveway, and we'll dispense the lemonade right there. I said, that is genius. They said, go get the hose. And so I did. Well, it wasn't too long for we hooked all the 6 sections of hose together. We stuck them in the bathtub, ran down a hallway, out the front door. My grandmother said, what are you doing? I said, nothing. Glenn said, I love your grandmother so much. We ran it all the way down there. We went and got a card table. We got some paper cups. Sally said, it's too bad that you don't have something more formal than paper cups. We might be able to charge money. Do you have any glasses that your parents don't use? I said, as a matter of fact, we do. In that same dining room hutch are these things that my mother and father never use. Every time my father says, shall we use the Waterford? My mother says, not tonight, not for them. They'll never notice. Go get them. So I did. We set them up on the table. We made a sign that said, freshly squeezed human agitated black lemonade. Today only 25 cents. And I'm going to tell you, this was like a baby boomer neighborhood. There were like 50 kids, and that lemonade was like a black hole attracting. There was an event horizon completely surrounding it. Before we knew it, there were 35 children lined up. We made the first 8 kids give us 25 cents. We handed out the goblets. They said, let's serve it. And I took that hose and I shook it and nothing came out. Sally said, you have to create a vacuum. I said, how do we do that? She said, you got to suck on the end of it. So I did. It didn't work. Glenn said, let me try it. It didn't work. Sally tried it. We just passed it down the row. Everybody's sucking on the end of it. Sally said, the vacuum isn't strong enough. Do you have a vacuum cleaner? I said, do we have a vacuum cleaner? We have a brand new deluxe Electrolux vacuum cleaner. It sucks the dirt off everything. My mother just turns it on when we come in the door. They say, go get it. So I did. Got an extension cord. We ran it all the way down there. Everybody standing there holding the Waterford crystal. One of us walking down the line with a coffee can, collecting quarters. People say, how do you make freshly squeezed human agitated black lemonade? We said 92 gallons at a time. Glenn said, turn it on. And I turned on that Electrolux and it worked like a charm. Pretty soon we heard that freshly squeezed human agitated black lemonade come coursing down the hose, and then we heard the Electrolux give a little cough. And then this amazing thing happened. Suddenly, huge torrents of lemonade came spewing out of the end, waving back and forth, spraying everyone its path, back and forth, collapsing like one of those inflatables in front of a used car dealership. Kids spraying, screaming, throwing the Waterford crystal in the air, running away. And then the Electrolux gave this one cough. Smoke came out of his side, and it died. And I heard my grandmother say, "Billy, Billy, something's wrong with the TV, quick." And I ran back up the driveway into the house, and I saw the catastrophe that ensued. The hose was leaking from all the different connectors down the hallway, dripping down the staircase, in the living room. The TV was off because of the broken fuse from the destroyed Electrolux vacuum cleaner. Underneath the bathroom, the ceiling was dripping down onto the sofa, forming an ominous black puddle. My grandmother said, "What happened?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "Okay." And I went back outside and found my friends standing there looking at the tragedy. Everybody else had left. The Electrolux was standing on its side, still smoking. Puddles of lemonade everywhere, shards of Waterford crystals. Glenn said, "Wow." And I said, "This is horrible." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "This is horrible. Nothing worked right. Everything's destroyed." They said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "No, you didn't solve any of my problems." He said, "We certainly did. Your problem was you were bored. Have you been bored for the past 4 hours?" I said, "Now that you put it in that light, I see that in fact I have not." See? Of course, it was just at that moment that my parents came down the street, pulled into the driveway. Glenn and Sally said, "We hear our mothers calling." And that's when my troubles began. "No problem, no problem. That's what some folks say. No problem, I can fix that. Make your problems go away." But when someone says no problem, is it a blessing or a curse? It could get better, but it might get worse. It's still a pretty new story. I did it a couple of months ago, and those of you know who Bill Lepp is there. Now the whole time I was thinking, this is kind of like a Lepp story. And I walked off the stage. He said, "That was great." I see the moon and the moon sees me, down through the leaves of the old oak tree. I know the light that shines on me shines on the ones I love. Over the mountains and over the seas, that's where my heart is longing to be. I know the light that shines on me shines on the ones I love. Some of you know that song, right? I see a lot of nods. Just sing it with me. I see the moon and the moon sees me, down through the leaves of the old oak tree. I see the moon and the moon sees me, down through the leaves of the old oak. I know the light that shines on me. I know the light that shines on the ones I love. Shines on the ones over the mountains and over the seas. Over the mountains and over. That's where my heart is longing to be. That's where my heart is longing to be. I know the light that shines on me shines on the ones I. This is a beautiful, simple song. It's just really great. You know, I heard it as a kid, and when I was growing up, and even until just a couple of years ago, I just figured it was like a folk song, right? It's so elemental. Everything in it is so simple. All these natural elements and two people looking, at a moon from a distance and thinking of each other. I was a folk song, but then when I said I wanted to find out about this song, a number of years ago, I worked at a storytelling camp, and Donald was there, and Willie Claflin was there. Donald Davis was there, Willie Claflin, and a couple other people. And there was this guy, Andy Davis, who lives up in New Hampshire. It was in New Hampshire. And it was a family camp. So at the end of every night, there would be a dance in the dance hall. And then Andy would bring out his accordion, and the kids would be dancing, but it was time for them to go. And he would play this accordion. He would sing this song. We would all sing it to the kids. I get choked up thinking about it. And then he would lead them like a Pied Piper back to their cabins. And then we would go on dancing. And I thought, that's incredible. I want to make up a story, I want to find a folktale that has those two people distance, and they would sing it to each other, So I started to do research on it, and I discovered it's not a folktale at all. It was written in the early 50s. It was written by the guy who wrote The Music Man. What's his name? Just went out of my head. I'll think of it in a minute. Language, it's my job. Yeah, he wrote it. He was actually... Yes, Meredith Wilson. Thank you so much. Yes, that's why you're here. Okay, very much. Thank you very much. It's just like kind of participatory storytelling here tonight. I don't know if there's anything I want to add. He was an amazing guy because he played piccolo in John Philip Sousa's band. And then he went to Hollywood, and he wrote scores for a long time. And then he wrote maybe the great American musical. It's just, it's like Norman Vincent Peale on steroids or something. So I started to look for a folktale, and I have a lot of folktale books. I have hundreds of storytelling friends, and I couldn't find one. And I began to call up people. I said, do you know a story, a folktale, where two people are separated and they look up and see the same moon? And they said, no. But I found stories about that. But they were all their contemporary stories. There's a movie called La Misma Luna. It's a Mexican film about a kid who his mother goes to America because his family has no money, and leaves him in southern Mexico with his grandmother, and his grandmother dies, and his cousin, his uncle takes over, and his uncle is a miserable man, and he decides he's got to find his mother, and he only knows the description. He knows that she's in LA, and she has described the corner that she calls him from. So he makes it all the way to Mexico, and he gets across, and he's in Tucson, and somebody lets him sleep in a hotel room, and he looks out the window, he sees the moon. He says, mi mamá me dijo que cuando la extrañara mirar a la luna, porque ella es la misma que está mirando, así no sentir tan triste. My mother told me it was lonely to look at the moon because it was the same one she was looking at. But I couldn't find one. When my son Noah was 16 and a half, he applied for this international baccalaureate program almost without us knowing it. He was going to be senior year in high school. And there was so little chance of him getting in. It was this free ride, and there were campuses all over the world, and they were only taking 50 American kids, and he got it. And suddenly he was leaving, and I wasn't ready for him to leave. Although by the end of the senior year, I would have been ready for him to leave. That's what the senior year is for. And we said, we can look at the moon. He was going to Wales. He's going to spend 2 years in Wales. We look at the moon. He said, well, I'll have to stay up late. I said, that's okay. And my son left from a gate in Boston on midnight, September 10th, 2001. It was the same gate. And he landed in London, and the world had changed, and he could not get home. And I was actually down here. I was working in Hickory, West Virginia, Hickory, North Carolina, that morning. Over the mountains and over the seas. So I've been thinking about that. I still couldn't find it. And then lately I've been thinking about where I grew up, the neighborhood I just kind of described to you. And I was thinking a lot about trees, because I have a particular memory of one tree and the moon. There were all these trees in my neighborhood, and somehow I knew all of them. The neighbors down the street had a huge sycamore in a backyard. And when they weren't there, it was perfect for climbing. I could just pull myself up onto the lower branch. I could get really, real high in that tree. And one time there was nobody there, and I slipped and I fell half down the tree. I bounced and bounced and bounced, and I finally caught myself. And I thought, that was the first time I thought, I'm gonna die. But in our front yard, my family lived in this little ranch house. There were 5 of us in this ranch house. And I know I described the geography different in that story, but, and there were 2 trees in the front yard. One was this huge pin oak, and another one was a crabapple tree. And the crabapple tree was wonderful for climbing, because the first branch was very low. And there were a lot of branches, but there was a path up to the very top that you wouldn't get scratched at. And I would climb up there and sit there, and nobody could see me. I spent a lot of time, even though there were a lot of kids in my neighborhood, I spent a lot of time by myself, wandering around the neighborhood. And I became a spy up there. And I would climb up there, and my mom would call at the door, "Bill, where are you?" And I wouldn't answer. She was only 25 feet away from me. I would sit up there, and I would hear people walking down the street talking about themselves, talking about what was going on. I would see Mr. Jones, the mailman, deliver, and the milkman would come. And sometimes delivery men or appliance guys would come up, and they would park in the driveway. My mom and them, they would talk at the door, and I would feel like I was party to an adult conversation that I wasn't supposed to listen to, even though it was about washers and dryers. And then one night, my parents had a party, and it was like a dinner buffet, and there were maybe 3 or 4 other couples. And after dinner, it just got louder and louder and more raucous. I think they had some aid in that. And first we'd been banished to the basement where there was a television, great reception in the basement. But then my mom called down, "You guys need to go to bed." And there was so much noise in the house and so much was going on, even though I didn't understand of it. I wanted to be part of it. Humans want to be part of it. We got our pajamas on, but I'd hear them laughing and laughing in the living room. So I'd walk down the hallway, and they'd say, "No, go back." My dad'd say, "I mean it, Bill, go to bed." But how could I sleep? You know, my parents were good parents. They cared for me, but they were not warm. And my dad especially. And it's only years later I realized my dad wasn't warm because he'd grown up rough. He got shunted from one side of the family to another when his father died quite suddenly. And then he was in World War II. He was one of the most active destroyer in World War II, and he didn't talk about it like all those guys. He didn't talk about it. And he didn't know what to do with us. So he was distant. He was a mystery to me. So I kept going out, finally getting sent back to bed, and I was lying there in bed, and my brother was asleep, and then it got quiet. And that was weird. I didn't hear anybody say goodbye. So I walked down the hallway, and there was nobody in the living room. I thought maybe they've all left. Where are my parents? They were not in the dining room. They were not in the kitchen. I thought maybe they're all in the basement. But they're being quiet. What would a bunch of grown-ups be doing down in the basement? To me, the whole adult world was a mystery. So I went down in the basement, but they weren't there. Where had they gone? I thought, my parents have abandoned us. I can't blame them. I understand we were always causing problems to them. They would just shake their heads and rub their foreheads. I thought, what am I going to do? And I wonder if I should go tell my brothers. And I walked back through the living room, and I saw the front door was open. And I stood in front of the screen door, and all of those adults were standing in the front yard. And they were talking, but they were talking quietly. And I said, I wonder what they're talking about. It's so secret they had to come outside. So I was in my pajamas and my bare feet. I slipped out the door, and the crabapple tree was in the shadows. And I climbed up into the crabapple tree, And I sat there, and they were talking and laughing, but not very loud, just gentle chuckles. And then my dad said, "God, look at it." What were they looking at? And I looked at them. All their heads were raised. And I looked up, and through the leaves of the crabapple tree, I saw the moon. It was a full moon. It was really a full moon. And my dad said, "Isn't that amazing?" And someone else said, "Yes." And I thought, who is he? And I didn't know what he was expressing at that moment. I didn't have a word for it then. All I knew was I was seeing something in my father and in all of those adults that I didn't know they had. And now I know what the word is. The word is wonder. They were looking up at the moon in wonder, and they were awestruck. And then finally, people started to leave. Some walked down the street back home. Some got in their cars. My parents laughed and walked back inside, and I was in the tree. And I knew I had seen something I was not supposed to see. And so I stayed in that tree. 10 or 15 minutes, I saw the light come on in my parents' room. It was in the front of the house. And then I saw the light go on and off, and I waited another 10 minutes, or it seemed like forever. And then I went to the front door, and of course it was locked. But the garage was attached to the house, and there was a little doggy door there on the bottom. And I could just barely squeeze through it, and the door that led into the kitchen was open. I tiptoed back down, and my wet feet, with the grass cutting still on them, I climbed in my bed, and I lay there. I finally wrote to a friend of mine, Lynn Maroney, who's a great storyteller. She's from Oklahoma. She's Choctaw, and she has she wrote dozens of books of stories about sky stories. She's collected from all over the world. She was a consultant at many different planetariums. For a little while, I was the voice of the moon at the museum in Huntsville, Alabama. She asked me to be the voice of the moon. And I wrote to her, I said, "Lynn, I'm trying to find a story about this, about a folktale where two people are separated and they look at the moon, and I can't find one." And it took a long time, but Lynn wrote me back. She said, "Bill, this is very strange. I don't know one. I've looked myself, I can't find one." And I was mystified how something so elemental isn't in these old stories. But now I think I know. This story is not their story, it's our story. For all the wisdom in those ancient tales, they didn't know that if you were thousands of miles away, it was the same moon. She said, only science has given us that gift, because the truth is, wonder is the foundation of spirituality and science. All scientists, true scientists, are overcome with wonder. That's what drives them on, just as anybody who's sincere in their search for the spirit. She said, this is our myth. This is our generation. We've been the ones who have been given this myth, who now understand it's the same moon all over the world. And then I knew where to look. Suddenly, from behind the rim of the moon, there emerged in slow moments of immense majesty a sparkling blue and white jewel, a light blue sphere with slowly swirling veils of white, rising like a small pearl in a thick sea of black mystery. It took me more than a moment to realize this was the Earth, my home. Alfred Worden, an astronaut. Alexei Leonov. The Earth was small, light blue, and touchingly alone. Our home that must be defended like a sacred relic. The Earth was perfectly round. I never knew what the word round meant until I saw my Earth home from space. Another astronaut. The first day we pointed out our countries. The third or fourth day, a continents. By the fifth day, we were only aware of one earth. So it seems to me that we have been given a gift that nobody else has had. In all the history, we know that when we look up in the sky, we are looking and seeing something that everybody on the planet knows. And I don't know exactly how we're going to make this through, but I think that picture of the earth, if we find a way to live together, is going to have been the start of it. And that song, I See the Moon Sees Me, it was a hit. 1952, and you know why it was a hit? Because there are all these boys in Korea. And you can imagine all of them singing a song and all their loved ones at home. Just like the boy in Mexico dreaming of his mother, just like me and my son Noah, just like all of us who are separated from people but still know we're connected. So why don't we sing it one more time? I see the moon and the moon sees me. Down through the leaves of the old oak tree, I know the light that shines on me shines on the ones I love. I see the moon and the moon sees me. Down through the leaves of the old oak tree, I know the light that shines on me shines on the ones over the mountains, over the seas, over the mountains and over. That's where my heart, that's where my heart is longing to be. I know the light that shines on me shines on the ones I love. Let's see if I can pull. Let me do this. So in 1982, I had pretty much decided I wanted to be a storyteller. It was a brilliant career move at that point. I was talking to somebody yesterday. I said, my poor dad. I went home. I decided I was going to do this, so I drove home. And I said, I got to talk to my parents, tell them what I'm going to do. Because I'd done a couple other things slightly more legitimate. And my dad was raking leaves in the front yard. And hi, Dad, how you doing? Oh, Bill, good to see you. You know, that's about the extent of what he would say. And I said, you know, I think about this. I'm going to be a storyteller. Not a mumbling word. I just kept raking the leaves. I was like, okay. So my dad died. He was 94. He died about 4 or 5 years ago. And when he was like 89 or 90, I took him out to a restaurant. And he said, do you remember what you told me you were going to do? And I said, yeah. He said, when you told me, I didn't say anything. And I said, yeah. I remember that. He said, I just didn't know what to say. I couldn't imagine how anybody else was going to do that. But, you know, they finally made their peace when I started showing up on, you know, All Things Considered on National Public Radio. Suddenly I was, you know, I had a legitimacy there. And he was proud of what I did. But so in 82, I was really interested in oral traditions, and I decided I wanted to go to Ireland. And so Debbie and I, my wife, went to Ireland. We actually landed in London. We hitchhiked through Wales, and we took the ferry over, and we hitchhiked out to the west of Ireland. In 82, Ireland was a very different place than it is now. It was really poor. And it was really kind of falling apart, especially the West. The West is the poor. Basically, everybody was leaving. Young people were leaving the West. There was no hope there. But I got out there, and that's where the stories were. That's where the traditional culture, what was left, was the most extant. And I started to ask around for people who might be storytellers. And I got to this little town called Doolin. And in Doolin, there's the ferry that goes to the Aran Islands, but they said there's some music there, and there's this guy you should meet named Michael Russell. So I got to Doolin. It was just like, there's like 3 pubs. It's kind of what it was, and a church, and really not much else. And I started to ask, I said, Michael's house is up there, you know, it's about a mile and a half outside of town, and you can go up there. He's probably up there. So we drove up there, and it was kind of a classic Irish cottage, you know, whitewashed, and I knocked on the door, and somebody said something. I opened the door, and there was Michael, literally sitting at a turf fire, heating something up. And I introduced myself and said, I just wanted to talk to you about stories. He says, I can't talk to you now, my dentures aren't in. But I'll meet you at O'Connor's Pub tonight. And so we met that night and spent some time with him and the next day. And Michael was very sad. He said, nobody cares about my songs and stories anymore. And we sat at the pub, and he sang a couple. He played a penny whistle, but nobody paid any attention to him. It wasn't very crowded. And he sold me this little mimeograph book he had of his songs and stories for £3. And when I got home, I wrote a song, which I'm going to sing for you in a minute, called Piper's Chair. Piper's Chair was the rock that he and his brother Packy would sit on when they were practicing their tunes when they were kids. And it's kind of a lament for a man's lost youth and what was happening in Ireland at that time. So last year, I've been back to Ireland a couple times, and last year I went back to Ireland. My wife, Debbie, performed the ceremony for Claire Murphy's wedding. Some of you might know Claire. She's a wonderful storyteller from Ireland, and the wedding was performed near the Hill of Tara, outside of Dublin, where the Irish kings were crowned. And so then we drove around for the next 2 weeks. And we have a lot of friends there. We spent a lot of time in Ireland now and visited other storytellers and writers and met a great guy, Neil Williams, who wrote one of the most beautiful books you could ever read. It's called This Is Happiness. I can't recommend it to you enough. Just a beautiful book about coming of age. And we got to Doolin. We were going to go out to the Aran Islands. And Deb said, we got to go to O'Connor's Pub. And we walked into O'Connor's Pub, and there were hundreds of people there. And Doolin has undergone this transformation because there's this huge rebirth of interest in Irish traditional music and story, and Doolin is the center of it. And I got there, and the first thing I saw up on the wall of O'Connor's Pub was a picture of Michael. And it turns out they have a Michael Russell weekend. Musicians and storytellers come from all over the country, from farther away. And so there was a session going on, and Deb is like, you got to sing the song. You got to sing the song. It's like, I just can't. And so she said, you have to. So at a break, I went up to the guy who was running the session. I introduced myself. I said, I met Michael, this was 40 years ago. And I've got this song. He said, well, you got to sing it. And so he shushed everybody when they got back together, and he said, we got a fellow here from America, and he's got a song about Michael Russell. So I explained a little bit, and I sang the song, and there was just this cathartic experience for everybody in the room. And I finished the song, and the band burst into the song, Piper's Chair, which is a tune that Michael wrote. So here's a song for Michael. Oh, for the days of the Piper's Chair, when the stories filled the music and the music filled the air. Is it just a trick of memory, or did we live without a care? We sat and played our tunes upon the Piper's Chair. When I was just a wee lad a-growing in my spring, I would hear my mother's stories, on my father's arms I'd swing. And with my brother Packy, I'd run to the meadow where we'd sit and play our tunes upon the Piper's Chair. And as our legs grew longer, we learned our lessons well. The fiddle and the whistle casting over us their spell. When the old folks gathered round at night, you'd want to listen well. For every song they sang, there was a story they would tell. Oh, for the days of the Piper's Chair, when the stories filled the music and the music filled the air. Is it just a trick of memory, or did we live without a care? We sat and played our tunes upon the piper's chair. Now Doolin's just a small town sitting on the bay. But the people came from miles around to hear us when we played. And O'Connor's pub was crawling, and the music filled the air. And I sat upon the flute and flute upon the piper's chair. But now I am an old man, my hill's no longer green. And it's 2 years since my brother's gone, no more will he be seen. Is it just a trick of memory? Has the magic left the air? There's no music in the meadow from the piper's chair. Oh, they can play their fiddles, but I fear that something's wrong. For it seems they know the music, but they cannot hear the song. And the Irish tongue is dying, and there's no one seems to care. You find no children playing on the piper's chair. Oh, for the days of the piper's chair, when the stories filled the music, and the music filled the air. Is it just a trick of memory, or did we live without a care? We sat and played our tunes upon the piper's chair. Piper's chair for Michael Russell. Thank you. I'm going to do one more song for you. Thanks. You know, I'm just a lucky guy. I'm traveling less and less. Of course, COVID kind of helped that process. I wasn't ready for that. How inconsiderate of the universe to give that to me. But I still love this. I said the problem is performing is just such a great drug. Everything else, the hotels, the travel, everything stinks. But then there's this, you know. It's like, okay, one more time. So I'm going to sing this song, and I'm going to sing this song for my friend Michael Parent. Michael Parent died last month, and he was one of the first storytellers I ever met in the United States. He's from Maine. He lived in Charlottesville, Virginia for a long time. He was like Christmas in July. He was just a wonderful listener, which is a hard thing for a storyteller to be. He was very funny. He was very off the cuff. Almost everything he did seemed to be improvised, but he had a really sharp eye and a really sharp ear for what it was to be a human being. And he heard me sing this song one of the first times he met me, and he said, I want to sing that song. He said, Bill, if you don't do anything else in your life, you did that. So it's kind of got a part for you. It's kind of a silly song, but I didn't know, you know. And I wrote it before Dionne Warwick and Elton John wrote their song, Bird Backpack, so you'll understand what I made in a minute. If you got potatoes and I got tomatoes, we could have dinner together. If you got a raincoat and I got a tugboat, we'll sail no matter the weather. If I had some money and the sky was sunny, we could spend the day by the shore. No, I'd be glad to share what I have. That's what friends are for. Okay, I'll just line it out for you. If you got potatoes and I got tomatoes, we could have dinner together. If you got potatoes and I got tomatoes, we could have dinner together. If you got a raincoat and I've got a tugboat, we'll sail no matter the weather. If you got a raincoat and I got a tugboat, we'll sail no matter the weather. If I had some money and the sky was sunny, we could spend the day by the shore. If I had some money and the sky was sunny, we could spend the day by the shore. You know, I'd be glad to share what I had. That's what friends are for. You know, I'd be glad to share what I had. That's what friends are for. If you're down on your luck, you don't have a buck, and there's holes in the toes of your shoes. You're scrounging for pennies, you can't find any. You got nothing left to lose. Don't you worry about dollars, give me a holler. Whistle and a yodelay you. If I got a nickel, we'll go buy a pickle. I'd be happy to share with you. Potatoes, tomatoes. If you got potatoes and I got tomatoes, we could have dinner together. Raincoats, tugboats. If you got a raincoat and I got a tugboat, we'll sail no matter the weather. Money and sunny. If I had some money and the sky was sunny, but we could spend a day by the shore. You know I'd be glad. You know I'd be glad to share what I had. That's what friends are for. If the job that you got just makes your mind rot and everybody takes you for granted, and you're frying your mind to 5 from 9 and you feel like you're on the wrong planet, don't mess with those blues, you got nothing to lose. And walking from a place like that, why we can sing in the streets, be light on our feet, split what goes in the hat. Potatoes, if you got potatoes and I got tomatoes, we could have dinner together. Raincoats, if you got a raincoat and I got a tugboat, we'll sail no matter the weather. Money, if I had some money and the sky was sunny, we could spend a day by the shore. You know I'd be glad, you know I'd be glad to share what I had. That's what friends are for. See, I wrote this song, I was about 32 years old. Before I sing the last verse, there's something else I discovered. I was singing this song one day and I said, I mean, this is kind of a traditional chord pattern, ragtime chord pattern, but I said, this sounds familiar somehow. And then it hit me. When you get older, losing your hair many years from now. Da, 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 da. Will you still need me? Okay, it's written. He stole it too, sorry. When you get older, if people get colder, don't give you the time of day. They just ignore you, they don't care for you, and just cause your hair's gone gray or away. Don't you feel alone? Get on the phone. Dial my number, give me a ring. I will be that way too, wearing corrective shoes. We can get together and sing last chance. If you got potatoes and I got tomatoes, we could have dinner together. Raincoats, if you got a raincoat and I got a tugboat, we'll sail no matter the weather. Money, I had some money and the sky was sunny. We could spend a day by the shore. You know I'd be glad to share what I had. That's what friends are for. Oh, you know I'd be glad to share what I had. That's what friends are for. Indeed you are. Thank you so much.